The air in the ether woods didn't just feel cold, it felt ancient and wrong. Kael gripped the handle of his thermal scanner, its screen spitting out useless gibberish. He'd followed the gravitational anomaly signal, a desperate, foolish chase for a Nobel Prize, and ended up falling through what felt like wet silk into another dimension. The trees here were bioluminescent, their huge, leathery leaves casting the world in an eerie, pulsing cyan glow. The silence was heavier than the oxygen-rich atmosphere, the kind of silence that suggests you're being hunted but not seen. He'd only been in this place, the locals on the edge of the wormhole called it the bleed, for 20 minutes when the burning started. It began as a dull ache in his left forearm, then quickly escalated into a searing, white-hot agony. Looking down, Kael saw it. A thin, vine-like tendril, barely visible against his dark exploration suit, had wrapped itself around his wrist. It wasn't organic as he knew it. It was glistening black and pulsing with a deep violet light, sinking microthorns deep into his skin. He recognized the pattern instantly from his old exobiology texts. The Vesper Parasite. Untreatable. Fatal in hours. Kael scrambled, trying to cut the vine, but his knife was useless against its tensile strength. The burning spread up his arm, his knees buckling with the pain. This is it, he thought, this is how the great explorer dies, choked by a cosmic weed in a glowing, forgotten forest. He slumped against the root of a massive, glowing tree, his breath shallowing, the edges of his vision starting to gray out. He was trying to take one last, desperate breath of the strange electric air when she appeared. She didn't walk, she materialized. One moment the air was empty, the next it was filled with her terrifying, ethereal presence. She was breathtaking and utterly lethal, exactly like the legends. Her skin was a near white silver, reflecting the blue light of the forest in a way that made her look carved from moonlight. Her long, white hair seemed to float around her as if suspended in water. And her eyes, they were entirely devoid of pupils, two deep pools of glowing, pulsating crimson. The enormous, midnight black wings folded behind her, and the intricate, glowing blue runes etched into her armor confirmed his worst fears. An Eldrin. The vampire race of this dimension. The one Kael had always feared the most. She stared down at him with an expression of cold, predatory assessment. She was exactly the creature in the thumbnail, leaning over him, her face a mask of potent, ancient power. She wasn't stalking him, she was merely collecting him. A fleshling, her voice resonated in his mind, not through his ears. It was a sound like wind chimes made of ice. Lost and dying. A pathetic trespasser. Kael tried to lift his hand to protest, but the parasite's venom had locked his muscles. He could only manage a pathetic groan as the pain twisted his gut. He saw the shift in her expression then, a flicker of something beyond cold hunger. She was looking not at him but at the black vine on his arm. A look of ancient, deep-seated revulsion crossed her silver face. "The Vesper," she hissed, a low, guttural sound that was entirely different from the musicality of her previous thought speech. "It has been centuries since I sensed that corruption." Kael watched, helpless, as she knelt beside him. He saw the long, sharp ivory of her fangs emerge. He closed his eyes, bracing himself for the predatory kill he had always been warned about. This was the end. He was going to be drained. His last moment would be one of fear and agony. But the agony that came was not draining. Her grip on his face was surprisingly gentle, her cold fingers resting on his jaw. Then she moved. Her fangs sank into the side of his neck, not with the quick, brutal force of a hunter, but with a strange, deliberate precision. A wave of icy fire shot through Kael's body, causing him to arch his back and scream. A scream that was lost as the Eldrin energy poured into him. It was a raw, electric shock, cold and bright, that felt like pure starlight being injected directly into his veins. The pain of the parasite vanished. It was utterly overwhelmed, scorched by the influx of her life force. Kael's body seized, and he felt a horrifying, exhilarating rush as the Eldrin's venomous, healing magic attacked the parasite on a cellular level. He felt the black vine wither and retract, his skin healing instantly where the thorns had pierced it. She pulled back quickly, a faint, almost imperceptible line of his blood tracing a path down her chin. Her crimson eyes, which had glowed brighter during the transfer, locked onto his wide, terrified ones. Her chest was heaving. She had given him something precious, something vital to save him. Kael was completely healed but utterly weak, leaning heavily against the tree. The warmth of the alien vampire's blood, or whatever potent substance she had injected, was still coursing through his body, making his human heart race and his mind swim. "Why?" he choked out, his voice a hoarse whisper. "You could have let me die. Why? Why did you bite me to save my life? She stood up, towering over him, her long pointed ears twitching slightly as she scanned the surrounding woods. There was a desperate urgency to her movements now. The Vesper is an ancient blight, little fleshling, she resonated, her voice harsher now. It pollutes everything it touches. I could not allow it to taint even your small, insignificant death in my forest. It was an act of sanitation, not of mercy. She gave a sharp, impatient wave of her hand. But the transfer has bound you to me whether I wish it or not. The bond is a weakness and others will smell it. And they will come for you. And for me. She unfolded her massive, terrifying wings fully, the sound like ripping silk, and extended one hand down to Kael, a silent, urgent demand. My name is Lyra. Her crimson eyes narrowed to dangerous slits, the blue runes on her armor glowing intensely. Now stand. We leave. If they catch you, they will kill you slowly. If they catch me, they will be far less kind. And with that, the creature he had feared his entire life, the one who had just saved him with a lethal kiss, became his only hope of survival. The bond she spoke of pulsed in his neck, a constant, low thrum, reminding him he was no longer fully Kael, the human botanist, but something else entirely, bound to the Eldrin Lyra. Kael's legs felt like water, yet the sheer fear of the consequences Lyra had hinted at was enough to force him upright. He gripped her offered hand, surprised by the firmness of her cold, stone-like skin. Her grip wasn't gentle, it was a shackle, a command to move. The Eldrin's power, which had saved him moments ago, now felt like a heavy, dangerous leash around his life. Which direction? Kael managed to ask, his throat dry. The ground beneath his feet was spongy, covered in phosphorescent moss, and the air was thick with the scent of ozone and strange, metallic flora. Lyra didn't answer with words. She simply tightened her grip and hauled him forward, her speed instantly challenging his maximum run. Her movements were fluid and silent, like oil sliding over glass. Kael, a trained man, struggled to keep pace with her effortless, near-flying stride. The enormous black wings, folded tightly against her back, made her silhouette daunting, even as they sliced through the heavy, glowing foliage. Don't speak, she thought projected to him, the sound cutting through his confusion like a crystal knife. Sound attracts the lesser hunters. Use your eyes. You have been granted life, do not waste it by being careless. He saw the intensity in her crimson gaze as she constantly scanned the tree line. The urgency she felt was palpable, transmitted not only through the mental link but also through the sheer tension in her body. He realized she wasn't just worried about him, she was genuinely fleeing something much more powerful than herself. Who is they? Kael projected back, experimenting with the thought link. He felt a faint psychic pressure against his mind, her silent irritation. My species. The elders, she finally relented, her thought laced with contempt. You are an insult to their ancient laws. I am an insult to their dogma. Together, we are a crime punishable by eternal isolation in the void pits. Kael stumbled over a root, and Lyra stopped instantly, her movement a sharp, unnatural halt. She spun, and the glow of the moon, a huge, fractured sphere of blue light hanging low over the canopy, caught the lethal curve of her fangs. He felt a wave of crushing anxiety from her. It wasn't about him tripping, it was about the delay. The bond is not a weakness I need, fleshling. But now that it is cast, I feel your fatigue, your slow human heart rate. I must manage it, she said, her thoughts sharp and precise. She reached out and placed her palm directly over the spot where she had bitten him. Kael gasped as another surge of that cold, bright Eldrin energy flowed into him. It wasn't the violent rush of the healing bite, but a sustained, powerful trickle. It didn't heal wounds this time, it simply erased his exhaustion. His muscles felt instantly renewed, his mind sharper than before. It was an involuntary, non-lethal use of her power, a maintenance charge to keep her newly acquired cargo moving. You are using me like a battery, Kael whispered, awe and terror mixing in his voice. I am using the energy I gave you to sustain the vessel it inhabits, Lyra corrected, pulling him again. It is a temporary symbiosis. The Vesper would have killed you. My essence did not just cure the poison, it integrated with your primitive life force. Every moment we are linked, you draw a fraction of my strength and I can, unfortunately, feel every pathetic tremor of your weak fear. They moved deeper into the woods, the environment becoming more hostile. The glowing flora was replaced by strange, twisted, thorn-covered trees that seemed to groan as they passed. Lyra pointed upwards with her chin. We need the upper canopy. They do not hunt well in the high air. Kael looked up. The canopy was a dizzying maze of interlocked branches hundreds of feet above, completely obscured by the eerie perpetual twilight of the bleed. "Oh, I can't climb that," he protested, the task seeming impossible. Lyra looked at him with an expression that bordered on pity. "You forget what I am, Kael. And you forget that I have not been wasting energy walking." With a sudden explosive burst of controlled power, Lyra lifted him effortlessly into her arms, cradling him against her heavily armored chest. He felt the immense power of her muscles, and the disturbing rock-hard texture of the plates covering her torso. Before Kael could fully register the intimacy or the danger, she launched herself. The sound of her wings beating the dense air was the first noise he'd heard that wasn't a thought or a forest groan. It was powerful and rhythmic, a dark, reassuring beat against the chaos. They shot upwards, the glowing trees blurring beneath them. The sheer speed stole Kael's breath, and he instinctively buried his face into the cold curve of her neck, trying to shield his eyes from the rush. He noticed the runes on her armor were pulsing faster, reflecting the exertion. They landed silently on a broad, flat branch of a gargantuan, moss-covered tree. From this height, Kael could see the true scope of the Eldrin dimension. Endless blue forest under a massive, shimmering blue moon. It was horrifyingly beautiful. Lyra set him down immediately. She reached up to her neck, where her silver skin had been briefly visible beneath the collar of her armor. She gently touched the two small puncture wounds from her fangs. "The bond is strengthening already," she murmured, not to him but to the air. "My elders will send the trackers soon. We cannot remain in one location for more than a single rotation." Before Kael could ask what a rotation was, a new wave of fear, chilling and alien, hit him. It wasn't his own fear but Lyra's. It was raw, potent, and focused entirely on a single point in the distance. Then he heard it. Not through the thought link but through his ears, a low rhythmic thrumming sound, distant but approaching fast. It sounded like heavy, powered armor moving through the air, and it carried a powerful, hostile intent. Lyra's crimson eyes narrowed, and she placed her hand over the hilt of a curved, glowing knife strapped to her thigh. "They found the initial scent faster than I anticipated. The trackers are near." "The one leading them?" Lyra paused, her face tightening with a dark, bitter rage. "Is Xarin." She pushed Kael back against the bark of the tree, her body shielding his, and her head tilted up to the sky, listening. Her entire demeanor had shifted from cold protector to vengeful warrior. Kael felt the heat of his own rapidly beating heart, terrified, yet shielded by the very creature he should have been running from. He was now inextricably tied to her, a human anchor in an alien war. The thrumming grew louder, closer, echoing through the dense canopy. Lyra's body pressed against Kael's, her armored form a cold, unyielding barrier. He could feel the tremor in her, a mix of readiness for battle and a profound, ancient hatred for the name Xarin. This wasn't just about escape anymore, it was personal. "Stay behind me. Do not move. Do not make a sound. Do not even breathe too loudly," Lyra commanded, her voice a low, fierce growl in his mind. Her hand was now firmly on the hilt of her glowing knife, its blue light reflecting in her crimson eyes. Kael followed her instructions, his heart hammering against his ribs. He peeked over her shoulder, trying to make out shapes in the shadowy canopy. The Eldrin dimension's natural light was always dim, casting long, dancing shadows that made distinguishing friend from foe almost impossible. Suddenly, a massive, dark shape sliced through the air just above them so fast it was a blur. It was another Eldrin, similar in size to Lyra, but its armor was a deep, menacing black, devoid of the intricate, glowing runes that adorned Lyra's. This one was all brute force designed for hunting. "Too close," Lyra projected, her thought voice filled with alarm. She pushed Kael further into the thick, dark foliage of the tree, creating a natural camouflage. "He's using sonic pulses to scan the air. He will not see us, but he will hear us if we make a mistake." The thrumming passed directly overhead again, closer this time. Kael could feel the vibrations through the tree branch. He held his breath, forcing his body to remain utterly still. He was a botanist, an exobiologist, not a soldier. His training was in observation, not evasion. But now his life depended on both. He felt the strange bond between them pulse. This time it wasn't just Lyra pushing energy into him. He felt a faint, almost imperceptible drain from his own life force. It was subtle like a whisper, but it was there. And with it, a surge of a strange, new awareness. Kael closed his eyes, focusing on the thrumming sound. He didn't just hear it with his ears. He could now feel its vibrations in his bones, almost see its sonic waves rippling through the air, even through the dense leaves. He could perceive the Eldrin tracker's path, not as a physical entity, but as a distortion in the very fabric of the air around them. He's going to circle back on a lower trajectory, Kael whispered, his voice barely audible even to himself. He's targeting this branch. He's going to stop just above us. Lyra froze. Her crimson eyes, usually so cold and unreadable, widened slightly in surprise. She turned her head slightly, peering at him over her shoulder. How do you know this? She demanded, her thought voice sharp with suspicion and a hint of something else, astonishment. You have no Eldrin sensory organs. I don't know, Kael admitted, a tremor in his voice. I just feel it. The way the sound ripples. It's like I can see the air move. He pointed instinctively to a thicker part of the branch, where a cluster of dark, nutrient-gathering fungi grew. If we move there, to that cluster, he won't be able to pin our location exactly. Lyra hesitated for only a fraction of a second, her gaze piercing, assessing. Then, without another word, she pulled him. Her movements were swift and silent, like a shadow detaching itself from the wall. They pressed themselves against the fungi-covered bark. Kael felt the rough, damp texture of the growth against his face, its earthy smell filling his nostrils. The thrumming intensified. The Eldrin tracker, a massive warrior encased in black armor, landed on the branch directly above where they had just been. Its wings folded with a soft whoosh and its head, encased in a helmet with glowing red visors, slowly rotated. Kael felt a cold dread as the invisible sonic pulses swept over their hiding spot, a prickling sensation on his skin. He's sending out a focused burst. It's like a thermal scan, but for organic energy signatures, Lyra projected, her voice strained. He knows we are here. But he cannot pinpoint us exactly. This is your doing, fleshling. Kael felt a strange sense of vindication even amidst the terror. His human perception, enhanced by Lyra's bite, was giving them an edge. He closed his eyes again, trying to use this new, terrifying ability. He focused on the Eldrin above, on the subtle distortions in the air it created. There's a weakness, Kael projected, his mind racing. His armor. On the left side, under his shoulder blade. It's not reflecting the sonic pulses as well. It's a slight gap. Lyra's body stiffened. A gap in Eldrin battle armor is unheard of. We are forged with one purpose, perfection. Maybe it's not a flaw. Maybe it's a design element. For heat dissipation? Kael theorized, drawing on his biological knowledge. It's small. But it's there. A low, guttural growl vibrated through the air from above. The Eldrin tracker was becoming impatient. Its red visors flared, and it raised a massive, energy-bladed polearm. No more games, the tracker's voice boomed, resonating through the forest, a raw, unfiltered sound that grated on Kael's nerves. This wasn't a thought projection. This was a verbal threat. It meant the tracker was confident and close. Lyra, reveal yourself. And the human taint you carry. Xarin demands it. Lyra's grip on her knife tightened until Kael thought the hilt would shatter. Her eyes glowed with an intense, vengeful fire. Xarin will have nothing from me. She snarled, projecting her fury. She pushed Kael even deeper into the foliage. When I move, you move in the opposite direction. Do not stop. Do not look back. Your only chance is to make for the shifting falls. There your scent will be masked. Kael stared at her, horrified. You're going to fight him? Alone? My bond to you makes me vulnerable. But my honor to my ancestors demands I face this hound, Lyra declared, her voice filled with ancient defiance. This is not just about saving your life anymore, fleshling. It is about proving that even an outcast can still defy the tyranny of Zaron. Before Kael could protest, Lyra launched herself. She exploded from their hiding spot, a silver blur against the dark background, her glowing knife flashing. The Eldrin tracker above was caught by surprise, its polearm still mid-swing. Lyra moved with incredible speed, aiming for the exact weakness Kael had sensed. Kael, despite his terror, found himself moving. The Eldrin's energy in him, the strange new awareness, was guiding him. He didn't run in a straight line, but in a chaotic, zigzagging pattern through the treacherous branches, propelled by an instinct that felt both alien and his own. He heard the clash of metal and energy behind him, Lyra's battle cries intermingling with the tracker's furious roars. He knew he shouldn't look back, but the urge was overwhelming. He risked a glance. Lyra, an ethereal warrior, was locked in a brutal duel with the black-armored Eldrin. Her movements were a dance of death, precise and deadly. She was fighting not just for her life but for his. And with every clash, Kael felt a distant echo of the impact, a phantom pain in his own limbs, a testament to the powerful, dangerous bond that tied them. He was not just running, he was running with her battle in his very soul. Kael didn't stop. He couldn't. The sounds of combat exploding behind him were a physical spur. The heavy, metallic clang of the Eldrin tracker's polearm colliding with Lyra's smaller, curved knife sent violent, sickening jolts through his newly formed psychic bond. Every grunt of exertion Lyra made was a sharp, painful echo in his own chest, and he could vividly sense the tracker's raw, brutal intent, the intent to capture Lyra and destroy him. He pushed his body harder than he ever thought possible. The Eldrin energy was a potent, unseen drug in his system. It didn't just mask his fatigue, it demanded movement. He felt lighter, faster, his mind a crystalline lens focusing only on survival. He leaped from branch to branch, no longer stumbling, using the subtle energy distortion that had helped him evade the tracker as a map. He could feel the strongest, safest routes through the high canopy. But the sensory input was overwhelming. As he ran, a sharp, searing pain shot through his left shoulder, a phantom injury. He momentarily lost his footing, scraping his palm raw on the coarse bark. Lyra's hurt, he realized with a jolt of panic. The bond was a two-way street, not just sharing Lyra's strength, but also her suffering. "Lyra, are you all right?" He projected frantically, his thought raw with fear. A wave of crushing contempt and rage slammed back into his mind, followed by a surge of defiant power. "Focus on the mission, fleshling. I am Eldrin. The tracker's blade grazed my plating. It is a scratch. Do not slow your pace with needless worry." He felt the sting of her mental rebuke, yet the shared pain was undeniable. She was minimizing her injury. That meant he had to run faster, giving her battle time meaning. He continued his desperate run, the glowing forest a blur of neon blue and cyan streaks. He noticed something else about his enhanced senses. He was not only seeing the sonic ripples but also the energy signatures of the Eldrin dimension. The deep, black fungi that Lyra had used for cover, the massive, glowing root systems. They weren't just background. They were vast, pulsing reservoirs of Eldrin power. He passed a thick, coiled vine that hung down from the canopy. As he neared it, a faint, humming sound entered his mind, like a siren. Instinctively he reached out and touched the vine. A violent, electrical shock of information flooded his brain. He saw the vine's entire biological structure, its flow of nutrients, its defense mechanisms, its life cycle. It was an Eldrin life form, and it possessed a powerful, localized defense mechanism, a burst of disabling sonic energy. A trap, he realized. He pulled his hand away quickly, his heart racing. He hadn't learned to sense the life forms of this world. He had been momentarily linked to it, reading it like a computer's diagnostic report. The Eldrin essence in him was not just a shield, it was an interface with this alien dimension. Behind him, the battle intensified. A sudden, massive crack of sound, like thunder splitting stone, reverberated through the canopy. The vibration was so powerful, it momentarily stunned Kael, forcing him to cling to the branch. This was not a blade clash, this was the full discharge of an Eldrin weapon. He is bringing the structure down. Lyra needs help. Kael screamed in his mind, though he knew running back meant certain death for both of them. Lyra's thought projection was weak, strained, almost frantic. The structure is compromised. The central support will fall. You must create distance, Kael. They will use the collapse to cover their pursuit. Find the falls. Now. The branch Kael was standing on began to creak, splitting under the strain of the distant explosion. He glanced down through the foliage. The ground was impossibly far below. He had to cross to the next section of the canopy, a gap that was too wide for a normal jump. But he wasn't normal anymore. Driven by the shared panic and the potent adrenaline rush from the Eldrin energy, Kael didn't calculate. He launched himself, relying purely on the new alien strength coursing through his limbs. He flew through the air, covering the impossible distance, landing hard but cleanly on the branch of the adjacent tree section. He didn't just jump, he had moved with the precision of a creature designed for this environment. He looked back one last time, ignoring Lyra's command. The tree they had been fighting on was groaning, slowly tearing itself apart. He saw Lyra, silver and fierce, making her escape, her wings beating hard against the rush of falling debris. She was moving away from the collapsing area, not towards the tracker. Strategic retreat. The tracker, Zaron's hound, was momentarily trapped by the falling wood and vines. Lyra spotted Kael and sent one final, powerful surge of thought, laced with a strange, undeniable command. I am clear. The falls are southwest. Move, Kael. Use your eyes. You have a chance, we have a chance, only if you survive this part of the path. He took a deep breath, the cold, metallic air feeling like pure energy in his lungs. He was running not for himself, but for the fierce, dangerous creature who had gambled her own existence to save him. He gripped the edge of the branch and plunged into the unknown, trusting the strange alien awareness that now guided his every step. He was heading for the shifting falls, carrying Lyra's battle in his mind and a dangerous, undeniable future in his human-turned Eldrin veins. Kael followed the instinct Lyra's essence had gifted him. Southwest. The word didn't relate to any compass Kael knew, but the direction was an innate pull, a subtle gravity in his mind. He ran not looking at the branches but at the flow of energy between them. His enhanced vision showed him the Eldrin world not as matter, but as interconnected power grids. He ran for what felt like hours, the blue moon remaining stubbornly low in the perpetual twilight. The phantom pain from Lyra's injury, the scratch on her plating, had subsided, replaced by a low, constant ache in his own shoulder. It was a dull throb that served as a constant reminder that she was hurt, she was fighting, and she was far away. The dense, ancient forest eventually began to thin, replaced by a deep, hollow roaring sound that grew steadily louder. This was the sound of the shifting falls. He reached the edge of a massive canyon. The sight was breathtaking and terrifying. Water, glowing with the same eerie cyan light as the trees, poured over a colossal, sheer drop. But it wasn't the drop that was frightening. The water wasn't falling into a fixed pool. It was falling into a field of pure gravitational anomaly. The water struck the air 100 feet down and was instantly torn apart, spiraling into shimmering, unstable vortexes that randomly appeared and disappeared. The very fabric of space was collapsing and reforming with every rotation of the Eldrin moon. This was the perfect place to lose a set. This was utter, chaotic entropy. Kael found a small, sheltered cave carved into the canyon wall, hidden by a curtain of glowing vines. He scrambled inside, collapsing onto the damp stone floor. For the first time since Lyra's bite, he stopped moving. The moment he stopped, the full force of the bond slammed into him. It wasn't physical pain this time, it was emotional. A wave of crushing isolation, intense frustration, and profound, deep-seated weariness washed over him. He felt Lyra's mind. She was exhausted, forced into hiding, her body recovering slowly, and her thoughts were consumed with bitter self-reproach. The damage is done, her thought echoed faintly without projection, deep within his consciousness. Xarin's hound escaped, injured, but his scent is broadcast. The elders will know. They will track the two of us now. I have exposed myself and risked my entire existence for a temporary sanitation. Kael felt a sudden, fierce urge to defend her, to tell her that saving him wasn't just sanitation, but he couldn't find her frequency in the chaos of the bond. He closed his eyes and tried to focus, drawing on the Eldrin energy within him. He forced himself to use the sensory interface. He reached out to the raw power of the falls. The roaring sound of the water became a symphony of energy in his mind. He saw the gravitational anomalies as constantly shifting, unstable pockets of heat and cold. He could map the collapses, predict the sudden, dangerous void spots where the air itself was momentarily erased. He was reading the canyon not with his eyes but with Lyra's gift. He was integrated into the Eldrin environment. Suddenly, a new sound cut through the chaos, a deep, rhythmic clack-clack-clack. It was coming from the air above the falls. Kael scrambled to the cave entrance and peered out. Two shapes, smaller and faster than the previous tracker, were skimming the edge of the canyon. They were Eldrin scouts, moving with the cold, relentless efficiency of well-oiled machines. They weren't looking for Lyra's scent on the ground. They were analyzing the energy signature of the gravitational anomaly. They knew a creature with Eldrin power had been here recently. And they knew the signature was tainted. They are looking for the anomaly in the power flow, Kael realized, his mind racing. The bite didn't just save my life. It created a disturbance in their perfect world. He retreated into the cave, his heart pounding. The cave was protected from the gravitational instability of the falls, but it offered no physical defense. He had to mask his own energy signature. He focused his entire will on the cold, bright energy Lyra had injected. He tried to draw it inward to suppress the glow. He felt the energy resist. It was meant to be used to be active. But Kael, the human botanist, remembered his studies on deep space radiation dampening fields. Insulation. Absorption. He looked around the cave. The walls were covered in a thick, metallic moss that absorbed the surrounding blue light, leaving the cave almost pitch black. It was a natural energy damper. Kael pressed his entire body against the moss-covered stone. He willed the cold Eldrin essence within him to flow outwards into the moss. He was trying to reverse the flow, using the moss to temporarily absorb the alien energy signature that marked him as Taint. It was excruciating. The moss drew the energy out of him, not violently but slowly, painfully, like drawing marrow from the bone. He clenched his jaw, enduring the sharp, gnawing ache. As the energy left him, the brilliant, crystalline clarity of his new senses began to fade. The fall's roar returned to just a noise. He was losing the link. He was becoming merely human again. Just as the last surge of Eldrin energy left his body and was absorbed by the moss, he felt one last fleeting thought from Lyra, a projection so faint it was like the brush of a moth's wing. Go. I see their strategy. I must lead them away. If you feel my signal vanish, know that I am still fighting the isolation, still fighting Xarin. Do not move from the falls. It is the only place they cannot track a static signature. Then silence. The bond vanished. Kael was alone, stripped of his alien defense, his only connection to the dangerous warrior gone. He was cold, weak, and utterly human, hidden in a moss-lined cave, knowing that somewhere out there, Lyra was deliberately making herself a target to save his life. The fear was real, but now it was overlaid with a strange, fierce loyalty. The silence was deafening. Without Lyra's essence, the constant psychic thrumming that had become Kael's new normal was gone. He was just Kael again, a frightened, weak human huddled in a cold, damp cave. His skin prickled with the realization that he was a piece of meat hiding from cosmic apex predators, armed only with a dull knife and his scientific training. He forced himself to ignore the gnawing ache of Lyra's absence and the terror of her vanishing signal. He was at the shifting falls and Lyra's final, faint command was clear: do not move from the falls. Kael crept to the cave entrance. The Eldrin scouts were still there, circling like frustrated vultures above the chaotic gravity field. They couldn't descend into the turbulence, but they were methodically scanning the canyon walls. They were looking for the disruption that Lyra had created, and the scouts were clearly trained to spot any fluctuation in the Eldrin power flow, no matter how small. I masked my own energy signature, but what about the entrance? Kael thought. The moss is absorbing the energy I bled off, but it might be emitting a faint, unnatural signature itself. He needed to create a natural-looking disturbance, something the Eldrin would dismiss as the normal chaos of the falls, not a sign of a hiding prey. Kael looked at the curtain of glowing, heavy vines that concealed the cave mouth. They were full of the same Eldrin life force he had just temporarily shed. He pulled out the knife he carried, a standard-issue geological tool, and began to work. He didn't cut the vines. He began scraping the thick, damp moss and the glowing dust from the rocks near the entrance, collecting it into a small pile. He remembered Lyra's contempt for the Vesper Parasite and the Eldrin's obsession with purity. They hate pollution. They hate anything that taints their essence. Kael took his discarded thermal scanner, which had been useless since he entered this dimension, and smashed its casing against a rock. He carefully extracted the small, power-rich human lithium battery, a completely alien chemical component in this world. Using the dull knife, he slowly, painstakingly, sliced open the vein of a nearby glowing vine. As the thick, cyan sap oozed out, Kael dropped the human battery into the pool of sap. The effect was instantaneous and violent. The vine sap, reacting with the alien lithium, began to fizz and smoke furiously, turning a noxious, dark violet color. It wasn't an explosion but a rapid, volatile chemical reaction. The thick smoke, carrying the scent of alien corruption and human pollution, wafted out of the cave entrance and drifted towards the falls. The Eldrin scouts above reacted immediately. Their rhythmic clack-clack-clack stopped. Energy spike detected. Source: volatile contamination. Kael heard, not through the bond, but through the mechanical voice of the lead scout's armor, amplified by the thin air. The two scouts swooped down to investigate the smoking spot. They didn't land. They hovered cautiously, keeping a safe distance from the potent chemical cloud. Report: non-Eldrin biological decay, reacting with indigenous flora. Source: possibly residual matter from the Vesper cleansing. Low threat. Taint signature is dissipating naturally due to atmospheric instability, the scout reported. The Eldrin's arrogance, their belief that any taint would cleanse itself under the fall's chaos, was Kael's greatest defense. They quickly dismissed the area as a minor environmental disturbance caused by the battle with the tracker and flew away, their attention diverted to following the energy trail Lyra was undoubtedly creating. Kael allowed himself a small, shaky breath. He had used his knowledge of chemistry and biology, the tools of his world, to fool the superior technological senses of the alien vampires. He had bought himself time. But the relief was fleeting. As the smoke cleared, Kael's heart sank further. He felt the cold air on his skin and the gnawing hunger in his stomach. He was safe but utterly alone. He had to assume Lyra was now captured or had managed to vanish entirely. He crawled back into the deepest part of the cave, leaning his head against the energy-dampening moss. He was exhausted, but sleep wouldn't come. He closed his eyes, desperately searching for the slightest flicker of the bond. Nothing. Then, deep in the absolute void where the bond used to be, Kael felt a terrifying, familiar and malevolent presence. Not Lyra but another mind entirely. It was a cold, vast wave of supreme authority and vengeful power. He is looking for me, Kael realized, his body freezing. This was not a scout. This was Xarin. The mental presence didn't speak. It simply searched, its power so immense that it felt like an invisible sun passing over the canyon. It was searching not for a physical body, but for a psychic signature, the unique, powerful link Lyra had forged. Just as the presence swept over Kael's hidden cave, Lyra's final command echoed in his mind one last time. I must lead them away. Lyra had not merely turned off her signal, she had actively vanished. And now Xarin was searching the void she left behind. Kael huddled against the moss, a human soul trying to hide from a god, praying that the energy-dampening moss and Lyra's ultimate sacrifice would be enough to make him invisible to the ancient vampire he feared the most. Kael's eyes snapped open. He was still in the moss-lined cave, still weak and alone. The crushing presence of Xarin had passed, leaving only a lingering chill of fear. But the silence didn't last. A new form of connection had begun, a vivid, visceral flashback from Lyra's life, playing out in his mind with the agonizing clarity of a nightmare. Lyra hadn't just vanished. She was now broadcasting her deepest memories through the broken remnants of the bond, a desperate cry for understanding. The memory was cold. Lyra, much younger, stood in a chamber carved entirely from shimmering, obsidian-like material. She was without her armor, dressed only in flowing, ceremonial robes, her white hair braided with silver filament. Her crimson eyes were not predatory but pained and confused. Before her stood Xarin. Even then he was immense, his features sharper, his stance radiating absolute, unchallenged authority. Xarin was her guardian and betrothed, destined to share the leadership of their elder clan, the Etherborn. You are a flaw, Lyra, Xarin's voice boomed in the memory, not through his armor but the raw, mental projection of an elder. Your energy signature is impure. It does not drain life, it purifies it. This ability to heal the corrupted flesh, it is a genetic aberration of our ancient line. It is weakness. Lyra fought against the accusation. It is not weakness, Xarin. It is control. Our ancestors believed the bite was not merely a harvest, but a reciprocal exchange. We take life to sustain, but we can also inject pure Eldrin essence to scour out blight and disease. The ancient texts call it the Lyran Gift. Xarin's mental scoff was a whiplash of contempt. Lyran Gift? It is a genetic devolution. The purpose of the Eldrin is to transcend the chaos of life, to achieve pure, isolated power. Your gift seeks to engage with that chaos. You healed the great blight on the outer rim, a plague that should have culled the weak. You saved lives, Lyra. You saved them with a bite meant for death. This made you an outcast among the pure. And this made you a danger to me. The memory shifted violently. Xarin pinned Lyra against the obsidian wall, his gaze filled not with love, but with ruthless ambition. I cannot take my place as the true elder while my mate carries the taint of mercy. Your healing ability suggests that our species is not perfect. I will cleanse our line. You must renounce the gift or face the void pits, eternal isolation where the corruption of your kindness can never spread. Lyra refused. The memory ended with a sharp, wrenching snap of the psychic bond, followed by the sight of Lyra fleeing, her new battle armor, the one Kael knew, glowing with the defiant blue runes of her own ancestral design, a clear sign of her schism from the Elder Clan and Xarin's authority. The memory vanished as abruptly as it began, leaving Kael gasping for breath, sweat cooling on his forehead. He understood everything now. Lyra's bite hadn't just saved his life, it was an act of extreme rebellion. She didn't bite him for sanitation, she bit him because the Vesper Parasite was a perfect reflection of the corruption she was engineered to cure, the great blight that Xarin believed should be allowed to run its course. Her healing bite was the very thing Xarin wanted to erase from existence. And the bond? That was the most dangerous aspect. Lyra had used her Lyran Gift on Kael, a foreign life form. It wasn't just integration, It was an irrevocable merging of a purely human soul with the tainted Eldrin essence. She didn't just break Zaron's law, she weaponized her rebellion. Kael's loyalty solidified instantly. He was no longer just running for his life. He was a living, breathing testament to Lyra's defiant philosophy. He was the proof Xarin feared. But the danger was immediate. Zaron's earlier psychic search had only confirmed Lyra's absence. Now, armed with the knowledge of Kael's human-Eldrin bond, Xarin would change tactics. He wouldn't look for Lyra's energy signature anymore. He would look for the unique, dual signature of a human infected with the Lyran Gift. Kael stood up in the cave. His fear was replaced by a surge of defiant purpose. He was Lyra's secret weapon, her proof of concept. He couldn't stay static anymore. The shifting falls had hidden him from the scouts, but it wouldn't hide him from the Elder who understood Lyra's power better than anyone. He took a deep breath, the cold air filling his lungs. He needed to find a way to activate the Eldrin energy within him selectively, to use the power without broadcasting his location. He looked down at his exposed forearm where the Vesper Parasite had been. He ran his fingers over the faint twin scars of Lyra's saving bite. He focused on the memory of the cold, bright energy. The Eldrin essence is not fuel, it's an interface, he reminded himself. It links me to the energy grid of this world. I need to find a way to tap the grid without causing a noticeable spike. He decided he must leave the protection of the falls. He needed to move towards the last location he sensed Lyra, the forest surrounding the collapsed tree, but now he would move as an invisible ghost, tapping into the Eldrin world's own power to mask his passage. The chase had just escalated from a simple pursuit to a deadly, ideological war. Kael crawled out of the moss cave. The air was cold and charged with the residual chaos of the shifting falls. The immediate, crushing fear had been replaced by the focused resolve of a man with a mission. He was going back to the collapsed tree structure, the last place he was sure Lyra had fought and sacrificed her freedom for his. The knowledge of Lyra's Lyran Gift and Zaron's tyrannical intent fueled him. He was the living, breathing proof that Xarin was wrong, that the Eldrin bite could be an act of salvation, not just predation. He couldn't let that proof be erased. He began the walk back, moving with a cautious, calculating pace. The terrain was no longer an obstacle, it was a puzzle he now had the key to solve. Kael focused his consciousness on the area beneath the twin scars of Lyra's bite. He didn't try to draw the energy out of himself which had caused the violent spikes. Instead, he tried to use the residual Eldrin essence inside his veins as a receptor, listening to the world's energy flow. Don't spike the grid, blend into it, he thought, recalling principles of stealth technology. He found it, a low-level ambient energy field that permeated the entire ether woods. It was the planet's pulse, the Eldrin world's constant, unnoticed hum. He carefully matched his own frequency to this ambient hum, using the residual power in his veins to act as a filter, making his human energy signature appear as just another part of the background noise. The effect was subtle but immediate. When he moved, he no longer felt like a foreign object grating against the world. He felt slippery, his presence barely registering against the massive, glowing trees and pulsing flora. He was moving within the system, not against it. He was invisible to any passive, long-range scans. But this trick had a cost. The power was drawn from his own body's resources, the way a chameleon expends effort to change its color. After only an hour of silent movement, he was already bone-tired, his human limitations quickly asserting themselves. The further he moved from the shifting falls, the more he risked running into Zaron's remaining forces. He knew the trackers would be focusing their search on a wider area, looking for Lyra's trail. As Kael approached the area of the collapsed tree, the air changed. The light became dimmer, the atmosphere heavier, a sign of heavy, recent energy discharge. The giant, nutrient-rich tree lay scattered in immense, splintered pieces. The Eldrin's battle had left a scar on the land. Kael stopped, listening. His human ears heard only silence. But his Eldrin-tuned instinct screamed. He focused the subtle energy filter. There was a disruption. Not a scout but an object. A small, heavy power source lying beneath a massive, twisted root. It was pulsing with a weak, residual Eldrin signature. He crept forward, cautiously moving the debris. Beneath the root, he found it, the shattered remains of the black Eldrin tracker's polearm. The blade was broken and the weapon's central power core was cracked, leaking a faint, dark energy. Lyra won the fight, Kael realized, a surge of fierce pride mixing with relief. She disarmed Zaron's hound and destroyed his weapon. But then he found the second object, a piece of Lyra's armor. It was a section of her shoulder plate, cleanly severed from her suit. The blue runes were dark and chipped, but the cut was surgical, too precise to be a normal battle wound. It looked like it had been removed rather than shattered. Kael sank back against a stable root, his energy filtering trick momentarily failing. The bond's absence was now a vast, crushing weight. Lyra hadn't just retreated, she had been captured, but only after destroying the tracker's weapon and leaving behind a piece of evidence. Why would she leave the piece of armor? He turned the metal in his hand. It was cold, heavier than it looked, and imbued with her essence. He noticed two tiny, almost imperceptible grooves etched onto the inner side of the plate. Kael, the scientist, knew better than to ignore a data point. He ran his thumb over the grooves. They were a pattern, a message left behind. It was Lyra's ancestral clan marker, but the pattern had been subtly shifted. He realized with a sickening jolt that this was not just a discarded piece of armor. It was a map. It was a coded distress signal meant only for someone who knew the intricacies of her bloodline, a signal she had gone to immense trouble to carve while in the midst of a battle. The message wasn't just directions, it was a confirmation of her location, followed by one cryptic, final addition: the repository. The Taint must return. The repository, Kael remembered Lyra's flashback. It was the ancient, obsidian chamber where Xarin had confronted her about the Lyran Gift. It was the heart of Xarin's power, where she was almost certainly being held. And the final line: the Taint must return. Lyra wasn't asking to be rescued. She was demanding that Kael, the living embodiment of the Taint she had used her gift to create, return to the heart of Xarin's control. She needed the proof of her rebellion to be seen by the elders. Kael gripped the shard of armor, his heart heavy with determination. The chase was over. The flight was done. Now the impossible counterattack began. He had to infiltrate the Elder compound and confront the ancient vampire who ruled this dimension, carrying the proof of his rival's weakness, his own life. Kael clutched the broken piece of Lyra's armor. It was his only map, his only key. He knew he couldn't rely on the Eldrin's power grid to maintain his invisibility forever. He needed to find the quickest route to the repository, and the armor shard held the answer. He found a secluded cave further up the canyon wall, far from the chaos of the falls. He activated his headlamp, a jarring, focused beam of human light in the soft Eldrin twilight, and examined the metal. The coded marker Lyra had etched was tiny, but Kael was a meticulous scientist. He saw the pattern was a variation on the Fibonacci sequence, often found in the growth patterns of terrestrial plants. Lyra, the botanist's alien counterpart, had left a biological signature. He quickly decoded the pattern. It represented coordinates based on the location of the 3 elder moon towers that constantly illuminated the dimension. It wasn't a distance but a convergence point. The map pointed to the deepest, most fortified section of the Ether Woods, a zone Kael instinctively recognized as the Elder Citadel. He also noticed a layer of microfilm on the inside of the armor shard. He carefully scraped a tiny bit onto a sterile slide and put it under the scanner's optical lens, the last piece of functioning human technology he possessed. The image that bloomed on the tiny screen was startling. It was a diagram of Lyra's Eldrin armor. But one section was highlighted: the neck clasp. The Lyran Gift has a failsafe, Kael realized. Lyra knew Zaron would capture her and attempt to force her to renounce her power. The diagram showed that the neck clasp was designed not just for protection, but also for power regulation. It was the only part of the armor that could directly suppress the Lyran Gift, locking Lyra into a state of pure energy conservation. If Zaron wanted to parade his captive and demonstrate his dominance, he would use this clasp to paralyze her unique power. But the diagram showed a weakness. The clasp could be reversed with a sudden, localized energy spike. The entire realization hit Kael like a physical blow. Lyra hadn't just sacrificed herself, she had engineered her own capture. She was giving Xarin a false sense of control while waiting for Kael, the Taint, to arrive with the means to unleash her. Kael packed his few supplies, the fear now completely replaced by a focused, desperate determination. He was no longer a victim. He was a saboteur and a delivery system. His journey toward the Citadel was fraught with peril. He had to cross open sections of glowing plains where cover was minimal. He used the ambient energy filtering trick almost constantly, moving slowly, painstakingly, blending his signature into the planetary background noise. He saw Eldrin patrols now. Not just the heavily armored trackers like Zaron's Hound, but slender, faster scouts, the same ones he had tricked at the falls. They were moving in tight, precise formations, their search expanding. Once, a scout flew directly overhead. Kael froze, pressing himself flat against the phosphorescent moss. The The scout's red visor passed mere feet above him. Kael felt the scout's powerful energy field wash over him, a cold, probing wave. He held his breath, willing his human heart rate to slow, forcing his frequency to match the planet's hum. The scout passed by. Kael had been invisible. Lyra's training, accidental or intentional, was keeping him alive. Finally, the trees gave way to a vast, flat expanse of polished, black obsidian rock, the Elder Citadel. It was a towering structure that rose into the sky, its architecture sharp, severe, and utterly without mercy. At the center of the citadel was the repository, an enormous, spherical building glowing with a malevolent, deep violet light, Xarin's chosen color. The main entrance was guarded by 2 hulking Eldrin warriors in ceremonial armor, their polearms crossed. The perimeter was secured by an energy fence that pulsed with enough power to atomize a human instantly. The front is impossible, Kael thought. I need a maintenance entry. A flaw. He pulled out the armor shard. Lyra's final, cryptic hint: the Taint must return. Zaron would be expecting the captured tracker's report. Lyra would have been brought in through the main entrance. The Eldrin despise contamination. Kael focused on the citadel structure, using his Eldrin-enhanced senses to map the power flow. The main entrance was clean. But his senses pulled him to a low-level power shunt on the far west side of the structure. This was the waste processing system. The section where the citadel's drained biological and energy waste was filtered before being returned to the ecosystem. It was the citadel's sewer system, its most contaminated and despised area. Kael realized Lyra's genius. Xarin would never expect the Taint to enter through the place where the elders discarded their own corruption. It was the only place the guard's vigilance would be lowered, assuming nothing pure would dare enter there. Kael crept toward the waste shunt, the massive obsidian walls looming over him. He found a small, almost invisible access hatch, barely big enough for a human. It reeked of stale energy and biological decay. He had the map, the key, and the intent. Now he just had to survive the journey through the Eldrin's trash and find his warrior savior before Xarin could use her capture to solidify his tyrannical rule. Kael wedged his shoulder under the barely visible access hatch of the waste shunt. The air that rushed out was a noxious, thick vapor smelling of stale ozone and metallic rot, the Eldrin's equivalent of sewage. He suppressed a gag, knowing this path, vile as it was his only hope. He used the last of his knife's edge to pry the seal open, fighting against the powerful magnetic lock. With a final grunt of pure, desperate human effort, the hatch gave way with a low, grating screech. Kael slid into the pitch-black passage, the hatch swinging shut behind him. The sound of its resealing was instantly swallowed by the distant, rhythmic thrumming of the citadel's massive ventilation system. He was inside the repository. He switched on his headlamp. The passage was narrow, made of rough, pitted obsidian, crisscrossed with thick, glowing cyan pipes, the arteries carrying the citadel's filtered energy and physical waste. The floor was slick with a slow-moving, foul-smelling liquid that soaked instantly through his suit, chilling him to the bone. Kael kept the light beam focused low, navigating the maze of pipes. He concentrated on maintaining the ambient filtering trick, forcing his mind to match the low, constant hum of the waste system's energy flow. It was difficult here. The chaotic, residual energy from the waste made the background noise unpredictable. He moved deeper, the passage sloping upwards. He knew the waste system would eventually intersect with the main power and life support channels, the only way to reach the upper, secured levels where the repository's central chamber lay. Suddenly, the pipe he was crawling next to vibrated intensely, and a wave of concentrated heat washed over him. A blast of heavily filtered liquid energy rushed through the channel, causing the metal to hum loudly. Kael instinctively pressed himself flat against the floor, covering his lamp. Through the dense metal of the pipe, a faint sound reached him, Eldrin voices. They were close. He found a junction box, a dark recess where the pipes converged. He squeezed himself into the cramped space, pulling the shard of Lyra's armor close to his chest. The voices grew clearer. 2 Eldrin guards, their armored boots echoing on the polished floor above the pipes, were patrolling the junction. The Elder Xarin is restless, one of the voices boomed, the sound slightly muffled. He has scheduled the purification ceremony for the next solar cycle. The Lyran is to be displayed. And the human taint? The second voice inquired, laced with disgust. Xarin's sweep of the ether woods found only the contamination the Lyran left behind. The fleshling is weak. He is assumed to be lost to the falls or consumed by the blight. Xarin is satisfied. The existence of the gift will be publicly renounced by the Lyran herself before her sentencing to the void pits. Kael clenched his jaw. Lyra was alive. But her purification ceremony was imminent. Xarin intended to break her will and publicly discredit the Lyran Gift by forcing Lyra to deny her own power. He had hours, maybe less, before she was marched to the central chamber. The guards moved on, their voices fading. Kael scrambled out of the recess, his exhaustion forgotten, fueled by a renewed sense of urgency. He located the main ventilation shaft, a massive, vertical tunnel large enough to climb. It was a straight shot up, but it was also the most exposed route. As he began his climb, his human strength quickly gave out. He had to pause frequently, relying on his grip and sheer terror to keep from falling. During one of these painful rests, Kael focused on the Eldrin energy within the ventilation shaft. It was a massive conduit of clean air and latent energy flowing up to the repository's core. He used the Lyran Gift's residual energy, the last of his power reserve, to gently tap into the ventilation shaft's power flow. He wasn't trying to climb. He was using the updraft created by the powerful fans as an elevator. The Eldrin's own system was carrying the Taint directly to the Elder's inner sanctum. The climb was swift and dizzying. Kael emerged into a wide, circular hallway, the main power conduits running beneath a polished obsidian floor. This was the upper level. He pressed his back against the cold wall, heart pounding. He could feel the power now. The air crackled with raw Eldrin energy. He followed the sound of a steady rhythmic pulse, the repository's core and Lyra's probable location. He reached a massive ornate doorway guarded by two silent, stone-like Eldrin warriors. Beyond them, through the slightly ajar door, Kael caught a glimpse of the purification chamber. The room was vast and circular, dominated by a huge obsidian pedestal. And there, chained in the center, stood Lyra. She was draped in heavy, ceremonial isolation chains that glowed a dim, repulsive yellow. Her silver skin was pale and her eyes were closed. Around her neck, the object Kael had feared the most, the neck clasp tight and glowing with a deep, suppressing red. It was actively draining and locking away the Lyran Gift. Hovering over her, radiating immense, chilling authority, was Zaron. His armor was not black like his hound's, but a pristine, terrifying gold, emphasizing his elder status. Kael felt a sudden surge of pain through the absent bond. It was Lyra's pain, a deep, silent, spiritual agony caused by the suppression of her core being. The connection wasn't completely severed, it was merely strained by the clasp. Xarin spoke, his voice booming across the empty hall, amplified by the repository's acoustics. The Lyran Gift will be purged. The corruption will end. We await the gathering of the elders, then her final renunciation. Kael knew he had only moments. The gathering of the elders meant his window of opportunity would close instantly. He had to create the energy spike now. He glanced around the hallway. The main power conduits were running directly beneath his feet. The energy was massive, clean, and utterly explosive if improperly diverted. He pulled out the final piece of his human kit, a small, non-Eldrin wire cutter designed for heavy geological cabling. He found a weak point in the floor where the conduit was closest to the surface. He would have to expose the conduit and then, using his human tools and a blast of Lyra's own armor shard, short-circuit the entire system to create the necessary, momentary spike, a spike that would reverse the neck clasp and unleash the warrior he had been running to save. Kael had no time for hesitation. He pressed his ear against the polished obsidian floor, locating the exact point where the main power conduit ran closest to the surface. The deep, terrifying thrum of pure energy was right beneath his feet. The two Eldrin guards stood like statues, silent sentinels of Zaron's tyranny, just beyond the door. He pulled out his human wire cutter, a tiny, insignificant tool against the might of an alien citadel. He placed the sharp edge against the seam of the floor where his senses told him the conduit casing was thinnest. He didn't hack or saw. He used meticulous, scientific pressure, forcing the tip into the minute gap. The obsidian was incredibly hard, but Kael was driven by Lyra's pain, which was currently a dull, constant ache in his own soul. He worked like a desperate surgeon, slowly chiseling away the flooring, bit by agonizing bit. After what felt like an eternity, he cracked through the outer layer. A faint, blinding white light leaked out, accompanied by a sharp sizzle of released energy. He was staring directly at the casing of the power conduit. He pulled the wire cutter back, grabbing the armor shard, Lyra's discarded proof of rebellion. The shard was still pulsing faintly with her residual Eldrin essence, but it was inert, a piece of disconnected technology. Kael knew his plan was insane. He had to create a momentary short circuit powerful enough to send a massive, localized surge into the Citadel's subsystems, specifically targeting the neck clasp's frequency. The human components in his wire cutter and the residual charge in the armor shard were his bomb and his detonator. He took a deep, shuddering breath. He held the armor shard in one hand and the wire cutter in the other. He focused his mind not on fear but on the Lyran Gift's frequency, the healing, purifying energy that Xarin sought to suppress. He willed the residual energy inside the shard and his veins to resonate with that frequency. With a silent, final dedication to the warrior who had saved his life, Kael plunged the armor shard and the wire cutter down simultaneously, touching the exposed power conduit casing. The result was not a huge explosion but a localized, blinding implosion of energy. The obsidian floor shattered violently around his hands. A blue-white arc of lightning, impossibly bright and searingly hot, erupted from the conduit, striking the Eldrin armor shard. The shock felt like pure lava rushing up Kael's arms. He screamed silently, the immense power threatening to burn him alive, but the Lyran essence in his veins acted as a momentary crucial shunt, guiding the current. The entire citadel flickered. Lights died then surged back on. The rhythmic thrumming of the ventilation system choked and stuttered. Inside the purification chamber, Xarin, who was preparing to address the arriving elders, recoiled violently. He was shielded, but the purity of the power surge was anathema to him. What impurity is this? Xarin roared, his voice shaking the chamber. The Eldrin guards in the hallway suddenly slumped forward, their circuits overloaded by the EMP-like pulse. Kael, his arms scorched and trembling, scrambled away from the shattered floor, adrenaline masking the pain. He glanced at Lyra. The neck clasp, which had been glowing a malevolent red, exploded off her neck in a shower of sparks, hitting the floor and skittering across the room. Lyra's eyes snapped open. They were no longer the dull crimson of a passive Eldrin. They were two fierce, brilliant pools of pure, pulsing blue-white light, the color of her healing essence amplified 1,000 times. The suppressed power of the Lyran Gift was not just released, it was unleashed. A blinding aura of blue-white energy instantly enveloped her, vaporizing the heavy yellow isolation chains that bound her. She stood tall, her silver skin shimmering, her wings snapping open with a sound like thunder, instantly filling the vast chamber. She was the very image on the thumbnail, now terrifyingly alive and unbound. Xarin turned, his golden armor gleaming. He saw Lyra, free, radiant, and more powerful than he had ever seen her. And then, his eyes fell upon the shattered floor, the burning wires and the small, scorched human figure scrambling for cover. The Taint. Xarin bellowed, his voice laced with absolute, chilling realization. You have brought the corruption to my sacred space. Lyra looked at Kael, hidden in the shadows of the hallway. The bond slammed back into his mind, not with pain or exhaustion, but with a tidal wave of gratitude, fierce complicity, and lethal purpose. You returned, Kael. The Taint has returned, her voice resonated in his mind, powerful and ringing with victory. Now let us show the Elder what our pure, forbidden union can achieve. She launched herself at Xarin, not with a weapon, but with a concentrated beam of pure blue-white Eldrin light, the very essence Xarin had tried to purge. The two powerful Eldrin collided in a devastating burst of energy, the sound of their battle drowning out the citadel's alarms. Kael, scorched, trembling, and utterly triumphant, was stuck between the two titans. His sabotage was complete, but the battle had only just begun. The fate of two species rested on the deadly dance between the ancient elder and the warrior who had been bitten to save his life. The air inside the purification chamber solidified into a violent storm of Eldrin energy. Lyra, blazing with the pure, fierce blue-white light of the Lyran Gift, crashed into Xarin, the elder clad in gold armor. The impact was not a clash of metal, but a collision of opposing ideologies, manifested as raw power. Xarin staggered, clearly unprepared for the sheer, unbridled force of Lyra's unsuppressed essence. He had expected a subdued prisoner, not an enraged warrior radiating the very purity he scorned. You dare. Xarin roared, his mental projection a blade of ice. He retaliated with a blast of concentrated crimson energy, the Eldrin's traditional draining power, aimed directly at Lyra's chest. Lyra met his blast not with a shield, but with an absorbing wave of her blue-white light. The Lyran Gift, the power to purify, consumed Xarin's draining energy. The crimson blast vanished into Lyra's aura, only to be re-emitted as a harmless, brilliant cyan flash against the obsidian walls. She was not just deflecting his power, she was neutralizing it. I dare to exist, Xarin. Lyra projected, her voice ringing with triumphant fury in Kael's mind. The Lyran Gift is the true path. Your tyranny is the weakness. Kael, hiding in the shadows of the hallway, watched the epic fight, his body still trembling from the feedback shock of the conduit sabotage. The battle was a dizzying exchange of light and shadow, force and purity. Lyra was gaining the upper hand, but Xarin was ancient and powerful, quickly adapting his movements to avoid her direct, neutralizing blasts. Xarin disengaged, flying upward to the chamber's ceiling. "You may neutralize my power, but you cannot overcome my physical might, you sentimental aberration." He lunged downward, intending to overpower her with the sheer, crushing weight of his golden armor and his elder's strength. Lyra was forced onto the defensive, blocking his heavy, plated fists with the reinforced edges of her wings. The bond between Kael and Lyra was now fully open, a torrent of mental information. Kael felt every bone-jarring impact Lyra suffered, but he also received something more, a frantic, unspoken plea. "He is too heavy. His armor is too thick. I need a breach, Kael. A target to deliver the neutralizing essence without wasting energy." Kael looked at Xarin. The golden armor was flawless, except for one spot, the neck clasp attachment point right below Xarin's helmet. It was a pressure point, a high-tech seam where his armor segments met. But to get to it, Kael would have to run into the heart of the battle. "I can't reach him," Kael thought desperately. "But I can still use the taint." He looked at the shattered floor where the main power conduit lay exposed. The conduit was still live, pulsing with immense, highly volatile energy. The earlier short had stabilized, but the wires were still fused and dangerously accessible. Kael grabbed the wire cutter, the instrument that had caused the momentary chaos. He crawled back to the broken conduit, ignoring the singeing heat. Lyra saw his movement and understood immediately. She let out a fierce war cry and launched a massive diversionary wave of blue light at Xarin, momentarily blinding him. Kael's plan was simple and suicidal. Use his human tool to create a focused, low-level secondary surge, not to free Lyra, but to overload the power grid of a specific section of Xarin's armor. He jammed the metal handle of the wire cutter back into the exposed, live wires of the conduit. But this time he didn't plunge it in fully. He held it at a precise, calculated angle, creating a small, continuous energy leak. He used the residual Lyran Gift in his veins to focus the leak towards Xarin, using the Elder's own energy field as a receiving antenna. The leakage didn't explode. Instead, it sent a highly focused electrical current through the floor, targeting Xarin. Xarin suddenly stopped fighting, letting out a sharp, guttural hiss. A small section of his golden armor, right near the neck clasp, began to spark and melt. The concentrated secondary surge from the human tool had short-circuited a minor sensor array near his vital point. "The taint. The fleshling corrupts my systems." Xarin roared, distracted and temporarily vulnerable. Lyra seized the opportunity. She flew in not with power but with lethal, precise speed. She slammed her pointed elbow into the spot Kael's surge had weakened. The golden armor cracked. Lyra followed up instantly, plunging her hand, shimmering with the pure, cleansing fire of the Lyran Gift, directly into the crack. The reaction was instantaneous. Xarin's immense body convulsed. He screamed, a raw, terrified sound that echoed the deepest spiritual agony. Lyra was not killing him. She was performing the ultimate forced act of the Lyran Gift. She was purifying the corruption of his ambition, driving the tyrannical impulse out of his core essence. Xarin collapsed, his golden armor dulling to a lifeless gray. He was beaten but not dead. He was simply recalibrated, stripped of his overwhelming, conquering will. He was reduced to the mere elder he should have been, forever humbled by the taint of mercy. Lyra pulled her hand away, her eyes blazing. She looked at Kael, hidden in the shadows, his body trembling from the effort. She extended her hand, not as a command but as an invitation. "You are the proof, Kael. We won. Now come. It is time for the final ceremony." The massive obsidian doors of the purification chamber slowly swung open. Several Eldrin figures, the elders who had gathered for Xarin's ceremony, filed in. They stopped, their crimson eyes widening in shock at the sight before them. Xarin, the powerful elder, kneeling, his golden armor dull and scarred, and Lyra, blazing with a fierce blue-white purity, standing over him, unchained. Lyra turned from Xarin and fixed her gaze on the elders. Her power was overwhelming. It was an undeniable, visible truth that settled the matter of dominance instantly. "The ceremony is complete," Lyra projected, her voice resonating not with tyranny, but with unquestionable authority. "The taint Xarin feared was not me, but the tyranny he allowed to fester in his core. I have purged it, restoring him to the balance of our ancestors." She paused, and then extended her hand toward the hallway shadows where Kael stood, still scorched and trembling, but clutching the broken wire cutter, the final piece of evidence. And this, Lyra continued, her voice softening slightly as she addressed the elders, is the true taint I risked everything to prove. Kael stepped into the chamber. The human element was jarringly out of place. He was small, frail, and his suit was torn, yet he walked with the defiant pride of a champion. He was the visible proof of the forbidden Lyran Gift in action, a human body healed, bonded, and repurposed by her unique essence. This fleshling is Kael, Lyra stated, her voice returning to a powerful projection. He was afflicted by the Vesper blight, a plague Xarin allowed to run its course. I used the Lyran Gift, the gift Xarin tried to erase, to save him with my bite. The result is the bond, a true symbiotic exchange, proving that our essence is not merely for consumption but for coexistence. The elders murmured, shocked into silence. They looked at Xarin, then at Kael. The evidence of the clash, the destroyed power conduit, the shattered neck clasp, and the defeated elder, was too overwhelming to ignore. Lyra walked towards Kael, her blue-white light bathing him in a protective aura. She stopped directly in front of him, her terrifying beauty softened by a profound intimacy. The law is not a rigid cage, elders, Lyra declared, looking at the council but speaking directly to Kael. The purpose of the Eldrin is not isolation. It is to guard the boundaries, yes, but also to recognize the worth of life. Kael is the physical manifestation of my rebellion, my proof that the gift is our salvation. She raised her hand and placed her fingers gently on the twin scars on his neck. The bond, which had been strained, snapped back into focus. A rush of shared emotion, a powerful, unspoken connection that transcended species and dimension. He is irrevocably tied to my life force now. His human existence is bound to my Eldrin destiny, she concluded. He is no longer just Kael. He is the taint, and he stays with me. The elders, subdued by Lyra's display of power and the undeniable truth of Kael's existence, eventually submitted. Lyra had not just defeated Xarin, she had fundamentally changed the law of the Eldrin dimension. Xarin was stripped of his authority, sentenced not to the void pits, but to a lifetime of service, healing the very blights he had allowed to fester. In the days that followed, the citadel was reorganized. Kael and Lyra found a quiet sanctuary in the ancient, upper gardens, a place of peace Lyra had not known since her youth. Kael sat by a pool of glowing water, looking at the Eldrin dimension. He was no longer just the botanist who stumbled through a portal. He was the consort of the Eldrin leader, the living proof of the Lyran Gift. Lyra materialized beside him, her wings folded, her light subdued. She reached out and took his hand, her touch cold and firm. You were supposed to run, Kael, she resonated, a hint of genuine tenderness in her thought voice. You were supposed to survive and tell your people the truth. I realized I wasn't running for survival, Kael replied, looking at the terrifying warrior who had saved his life with a bite. I was running for your ideology. You created the taint, Lyra. I had to bring it back to prove your right to rule. She smiled, a rare, breathtaking sight that made her appear utterly human, despite her alien features. Your devotion is illogical yet perfect. Your human heart is the strongest thing I have ever encountered. She leaned in, her silver-white hair brushing his cheek. Her crimson eyes, now softened by the knowledge of her victory, met his. The bond is permanent, Kael, she whispered, the thought wrapping around his heart. The bite saved your life, but it also made you essential to mine. You are the only life form that can carry my essence without draining. You're my anchor. My equal. She kissed him. It wasn't the predatory strike of the life-saving bite, but a gentle, consuming pressure. It was the kiss of two destinies finally aligned. The human and the alien, the hunter and the saved. Kael knew his life on Earth was over. He was bound forever to this warrior, this dimension, and the dangerous, beautiful future they had won together. He was the taint and she was the savior. Their story, forged in a forbidden bite, had just begun. The repository was silent now, the scars of battle already being meticulously repaired by silent Eldrin drones. The obsidian floor, where Kael had risked his life, was once again polished to a mirror sheen. Lyra had consolidated power swiftly, ruling with a fierce but restrained authority that spoke more of ancient wisdom than ruthless conquest. She was the Elder Queen, a title that sat on her like a mantle of light, but Kael felt the weight of that mantle pressing down on him. Kael was now the consort, a word that held no true meaning in Eldrin society, yet his presence was constant. He was an anomaly in a world obsessed with purity, and the older elders who had submitted to Lyra's power watched him like a precarious experiment. Every nod he received was laced with thinly veiled contempt, every address a subtle reminder that he was the Taint. He spent his days in the upper gardens, the same ones Lyra had sought sanctuary in, but their peace felt temporary. The Eldrin energy that flowed constantly through his system now seemed to amplify his human vulnerabilities. He noticed Lyra's own struggles. She was relentless in her duties, but the act of constantly maintaining the Lyran Gift's frequency, the unique essence that kept her connected to Kael and defined her benevolent rule, was slowly draining her. The deep, brilliant blue-white glow of her eyes would occasionally dim, a flicker of exhaustion Kael's bonded senses could not ignore. During a rare moment of privacy, Kael cornered her, his voice low with worry. "Your light is fading, Lyra. You are expending too much energy. The elders are looking for a weakness." Lyra turned, her silver face etched with impatience. "My strength is not your concern, Kael. The energy I expend is necessary to cleanse the damage Xarin left behind. I will not fail by showing fragility. It is my concern because I am part of the circuit now," Kael argued. "The bond is a drain on both of us. If you burn out, I burn out." She softened, placing a cold hand on his scorched cheek. "Your human worry is touching. Rest. You are still recovering from the sabotage." But Kael knew resting was a luxury he couldn't afford. He needed to be more than a symbolic consort. He needed to be a solution. His unique connection to Lyra meant her pain was his problem. His integration, ironically, was placed under the supervision of the newly pardoned, humiliated Zaron. Lyra's mercy had been absolute. Zaron was stripped of his elder status but was permitted to remain in the citadel, assigned the task of overseeing Eldrin maintenance and, most gratingly for him, Kael's rehabilitation. Zaron wore his defeat like a shroud, his movements slow, his golden armor replaced by a dull, common silver alloy. He maintained a veneer of grudging respect for Lyra's rule, but his contempt for Kael remained a palpable chill. One rotation, Zaron guided Kael through the citadel's vast archives, not to educate but to subtly undermine him. "The Lyran Gift is an evolutionary dead end, fleshling," Zaron projected, his mental voice devoid of its former booming authority, but laced with poison. "It seeks to maintain life when life must be culled to achieve perfection. Lyra's energy is being wasted maintaining your pathetic, weak life force. The longer you are bonded, the more your human frailty will corrupt and shorten her unique power. You are not her consort. You are a parasite." The word struck Kael deeper than any physical blow. He felt the cold, hard logic of the Eldrin doctrine, even if it was coming from a defeated rival. He couldn't deny the energy drain on Lyra. He was an observer, a scientist, and the data, even emotional data, supported Zaron's cruel thesis. He was a constant, necessary expenditure that weakened the queen. Kael walked away, the weight of the silver armor shard in his pocket reminding him of the sacrifice, but also the potential. He was the taint, the corruption Zaron feared. But a scientist knew that sometimes, contamination was the key to a cure. He had to find a way to make his existence not just bearable but essential to Lyra's power. Kael abandoned his passive observation and devoted himself to the Eldrin archives. His human eyes scanned the microscopic records of Eldrin flora and fauna, searching for a purpose only a botanist could recognize. Lyra's people focused on energy flow, Kael focused on biological structure. He discovered the growing threat in the outer rim. The records detailed recent reports of massive, fast-spreading energy drain spores, a new biological entity. Unlike the Vesper Parasite, which only required a momentary injection of Lyra's gift, this spore didn't kill. It slowly, agonizingly drained the Eldrin life force, leaving their bodies functional but inert. Kael brought the data to Lyra, who was in a tense meeting with her elders. "The spores cannot be defeated by force, Elder Queen," Kael projected, cutting across the elders' military planning. "They are designed to absorb and diffuse large energy blasts. You send fleets, you feed the contagion." Lyra looked at him, her beautiful eyes narrowed, silently challenging his interruption. "And what is your recommendation, consort?" "A biological counteragent," Kael stated, pointing to the molecular diagrams on the holographic display. "The spore shell is vulnerable to a specific, complex mineral. It must be neutralized on a chemical level, not a physical one." The elders scoffed. "Absurd. Our weapons are ancient and powerful." Lyra, however, trusted Kael's scientific mind, bonded as it was to her own. She felt the urgency in his thoughts, the desperate logic. She gave him limited clearance to find the solution. But Kael's relief was short-lived. That evening, the bond flared with pure, concentrated agony. It wasn't physical, it was the pain of spiritual exhaustion. Lyra was suffering from the political weight and the constant mental effort to run the Eldrin world against centuries of tradition. Her light was dimmer than ever. Xarin's words echoed in his mind, "You are a parasite." Kael realized his political maneuvering wasn't enough. He had to prove his worth on the battlefield, using his science to protect the Eldrin from the new plague. He needed the counteragent. He reviewed the archive notes on the vulnerable mineral. It was described as a highly volatile, energy-absorbing element found only in the deepest, most unstable location in their dimension, the void pits, the place of eternal isolation. The mineral was exiled there because its chaotic properties made it dangerous to the pure Eldrin power flow. Kael knew no Eldrin warrior would enter the void pits for fear of contamination and insanity. The mineral could only be handled by something already tainted and stabilized by the Lyran Gift. He found Xarin overseeing the maintenance of the former Elder's decommissioned black armor. "I need you to take me to the outer rim, to the edge of the void pits," Kael projected, his voice firm. Xarin looked up slowly, his eyes burning with controlled fury. "You seek your own final isolation, fleshling? You prove my point, the Taint seeks destruction. I seek the counteragent that will save Lyra's throne and her life," Kael retorted. "I cannot do this alone. Your knowledge of the old ways and the deepest pits is essential. I will return the balance to your dimension. But you must swear allegiance to Lyra's rule and help me now." Xarin studied Kael's small, stubborn frame, recognizing the insane bravery. He saw a chance for his own twisted redemption. He smirked, the expression dark and chilling. "A human begging an outcast to enter the void? Very well. I accept the bargain. I will deliver the Taint to its destination." The transport ship Xarin piloted was small, fast, and silently cut through the ether woods. Xarin navigated with chilling efficiency, his movements precise and cold. Kael, sitting in the passenger bay, used his modified thermal scanner to track the energy drain spores. They were an ugly, purplish mass, spreading rapidly across the outer rim's surface. "The core of the contagion is near the pit's edge," Xarin projected, keeping his gaze forward. "The spore draws energy from the pit's chaos, amplifying its infectious nature." They landed on a flat mesa overlooking a vast, swirling vortex of color and light, the void pits. The atmospheric instability here was immense. Kael felt nauseous, his enhanced senses struggling to reconcile the conflicting gravitational pulls. Kael, armed only with a containment canister and his human sampling equipment, approached the edge. He focused on the spore mass. "The mineral is the key. It needs to be stabilized with a massive, counter-chaotic energy burst, which my human equipment can measure but not deliver." Xarin stepped out, his voice sharp. "The mineral is volatile. It will ignite the Lyran Gift in your veins and kill you. Or stabilize me and complete the circuit," Kael countered. "Your elders threw it away because it challenged the purity law. But purity is what created this spore in the first place." Kael turned and looked directly at Xarin. "Your purpose here is not to watch me die, but to ensure that mineral is delivered back to Lyra. Swear your fealty to the Elder Queen, Xarin, not because you fear her, but because you understand that the Taint is the necessary survival mechanism you once sought to purge." Xarin hesitated, his defeated eyes flickering with the ghost of his former ambition. He saw the logic, the undeniable truth of Kael's existence. The Taint was the only key. "I swear fealty to Elder Queen Lyra and the tenets of the Lyran Gift," Xarin finally projected, his mental voice cold but binding. "Now go, fleshling. Prove that your corruption is salvation." Kael nodded, his mission solidified. He donned the modified Eldrin exploration suit, its seals reinforced with human polymers, and with a deep breath of the chaotic Eldrin air, he began his descent into the void pits. He was going to the one place in the universe designed to kill him, armed only with a promise and the forbidden power of the alien vampire he feared the most. Kael stepped over the edge of the mesa. The void pits were a breathtaking, terrifying spectacle. It wasn't just a physical abyss, it was a wound in the dimension itself, a churning vortex where colors defied logic and gravity was a suggestion. His suit's tether extended behind him, held by Xarin, who remained fixed at the boundary, his face grim. The moment Kael entered the unstable field, his Eldrin-enhanced senses were brutally overwhelmed. His mind struggled to process the torrent of information, energy fields collapsing, space folding, and the chilling sensation of his own life force being pulled in conflicting directions. He closed his eyes, forcing his mind to revert to its human training, focusing on measurement and stability amidst chaos. He relied on the minute Lyran essence in his veins to act as a compass. The chaotic environment was poisonous to pure Eldrin, but Kael's tainted and stabilized essence allowed him to navigate the instability. He could feel the areas of maximum instability and avoid them, instinctively mapping the less volatile channels. He descended for what felt like an eternity, the ambient energy of the pit trying to tear the human polymers of his suit apart. He finally reached the base of the pit, a cavern of swirling dust and compressed chaos. The air here was dense, electric and terrifyingly silent. There, in the deepest point he saw it, the counteragent mineral. It pulsed with an ugly, powerful energy, not the clean blue of the Lyran Gift, nor the pure crimson of the Elders, but a wild, volatile emerald light. Kael approached the mineral, his hand trembling. As he reached out and touched the glowing surface, the mineral reacted instantly. The bond with Lyra exploded into his consciousness. It wasn't a thought or a feeling, it was a raw, primal surge of terror, recognition, and desperate love. Lyra, miles away, had instantly felt the unique, chaotic signature of the mineral's energy mixing with his own. The surge was so powerful it physically convulsed Lyra in the repository. Xarin betrayed me. Lyra's powerful thought ripped through the bond, tinged with a devastating blend of fury and sorrow. He led you to your death. Kael's mind swam. He realized the urgency of the moment. He had to reassure her and complete his mission before she threw away her new rule to rescue him. He secured the mineral in the containment canister, the weight of the salvation and the chaos settling heavily in his hands. He was already ascending when a sudden, massive gravitational collapse hit his section of the pit. He was thrown against the cavern wall, his suit alarms blaring. He looked up just as the last of his ascent cables snapped. Kael was alone, trapped in the void pits, the counteragent in his hands, his suit compromised. He could feel Zarin's frantic anxiety through the faint link, the elder warrior now truly terrified he had lost both his life and his honor. Kael's only way out was to fly, and he couldn't fly. Kael struggled upward, relying on crude handholds in the rock, the powerful mineral radiating unstable energy next to his chest. He managed to climb halfway before his failing suit gave out. He slipped, falling rapidly toward the spiraling gravity well below. Just before the well consumed him, a massive silver shadow snatched him from the air. Lyra. She held him tightly, her wings beating powerfully against the pit's chaos. Her armor was scratched, and her face was contorted with a fury Kael had never seen. She had flown here, alone, defying her entire council, abandoning her throne for the sake of the human she loved. You fool. You magnificent, idiotic fool. Lyra projected, the thought laced with tears. She slammed Kael against the mesa edge where Xarin stood, horrified and pale. You betrayed him. Lyra roared at Xarin. Elder Queen, I swear my fealty. He chose this. I tried to hold the line. Xarin pleaded, his genuine panic clear through the Eldrin mental link. Kael pushed himself out of Lyra's grip. He was weak, freezing, and the mineral in the canister was dangerously overheating. Lyra, stop. Xarin is telling the truth. The mineral is the counteragent. But it's unstable. I'm too weak to stabilize it. If I let it go now, it will contaminate the atmosphere. Kael yelled, his human voice hoarse and desperate. Lyra looked at the canister, its emerald glow pulsing rapidly. She felt the instability through the bond. The energy was so chaotic, it threatened to unravel the Lyran Gift itself. She understood instantly. Kael was the stabilizing medium, but he needed a final, massive infusion of pure gift to complete the circuit. The double bite, Lyra whispered, the thought filled with terrifying realization. It will either destroy us both or join us completely, forcing my immortality to meet your human fate. Kael nodded, his eyes filled with absolute conviction. I choose the latter. Do it, Lyra. Complete the circuit. Complete the taint. Lyra threw her head back, letting out a primal, defiant cry that echoed through the void pits. All fear was gone, replaced by absolute, determined love. She grabbed Kael's face, pulling him into a devastating embrace. She sank her sharp ivory fangs deep into his neck, not to save him from death, but to save their shared destiny. This was no soft kiss. It was a violent, cataclysmic act of absolute transference. A massive, blinding surge of pure blue-white Lyran Gift flowed from Lyra, through Kael, and into the containment canister holding the emerald mineral. Kael felt his human body seize as his life force and the alien energy merged entirely, irrevocably. The three chaotic energies, human, Lyran, and void mineral, locked into perfect, stable harmony. The combined energy flowed out of Kael, causing a sudden, permanent mark to appear on his skin, a glowing cyan streak that ran from his neck, over his shoulder and down his chest, the final visible testament to their bond. Lyra pulled back, her silver skin glistening with effort. She had saved him, and in doing so, she had fundamentally altered her own existence. Xarin watched, humbled, as the unstable mineral settled into a stable, powerful counteragent. His redemption was complete. The bond was no longer a tenuous, psychic link. It was a physical, undeniable reality. Lyra was no longer fully Eldrin. Kael was no longer fully human. The taint was complete. They had won. Lyra stood over the containment canister, its emerald mineral now radiating a stable, beautiful cyan blue light, the color of the final, merged essence. The energy drain spores were quickly neutralized by the new agent, and the threat to the Eldrin was over. Kael's desperate gamble had paid off. He was a hero hailed not just by Lyra, but by the elders who had watched the whole chaotic affair via Zaron's recorded feed. But the victory carried a devastating price. Lyra took Kael back to her personal healing chamber, her movements precise and solemn. The cyan streak marking their irreversible bond pulsed softly on Kael's skin, a constant reminder of the intense fusion they had just undergone. The mineral is stable, Lyra projected, her voice quiet, heavy with an emotion Kael could not decipher. You saved my people, Kael. The taint is our salvation. Kael felt a profound exhaustion, but the energy flowing through him was stable, calm. What is it, Lyra? The bond feels different, calmer. Lyra turned, her eyes, those beautiful, terrifying pools of blue-white light, were filled with a deep, crushing sorrow. She reached out and placed her cold hand over Kael's heart, concentrating. The essence of the Lyran gift is reciprocal, Kael. When I gave you my life force to save yours, we created a dual circuit. The double bite in the void pits completed that circuit, forging a complete, perfect loop. She paused, her gaze steady. The circuit demands balance. Your human frailty, the short lifespan, the quick decay, was slowly, quietly draining my immortality as Zaron feared. Kael nodded, ready for the difficult truth. But the final surge, it didn't just stabilize the mineral. It stabilized us. Lyra's mental voice trembled. My Eldrin immortality is now permanently decelerating. Your human lifespan is permanently accelerating. Kael's mind, the mind of a scientist, immediately understood the consequence. We're meeting in the middle. We're losing the difference. Yes, my love, Lyra admitted, her voice cracking for the first time. I am trading centuries of existence for decades. You are no longer just the taint. You are my mortality. The Eldrin queen who once ruled with eternal life, now faces death at the time of her love's passing. Your bite, meant to save your life, has shortened mine. Lyra was utterly devastated. Her power, the Lyran gift, was supposed to preserve. Instead, her love had imposed a sentence of shared brevity. She looked at Kael, her perfect features contorted with grief and a desperate need to find a solution. I can search the ancient texts. I can try to reverse it. I cannot accept this, Kael. She pleaded, the fierce warrior giving way to the terrified lover. Kael reached up, his scorched human hands cupping her silver-white cheeks. He looked into her eyes, accepting their fate. He was the human who had once feared her. Now he was her calm anchor. Lyra, don't you see? Zaron was wrong about everything, Kael whispered, his voice firm. This is the true purpose of the Lyran gift. It was never about eternal, isolated purity. It was about connection and sacrifice. You hated the loneliness of immortality. You craved meaning. We fought the tyranny of isolation and we won. We won a finite, meaningful life together. He leaned in, his scarred skin against her cold perfection. I was bitten to save my life, Lyra. And in saving my life, you gave up your own eternal loneliness. This isn't a failure. This is our victory. This is our forever. The Eldrin dimension entered a new era. Lyra, the Elder Queen, ruled not from a throne of fear, but from one of wisdom and balanced power. Xarin, true to his oath, became her most loyal and effective servant, using his power to repair the damage he had caused. The purification chamber was converted into the Chamber of Coexistence, a place where Eldrin and their allies, newly welcomed after Lyra's victory, could gather. Kael and Lyra stood on the observation balcony of the repository, overlooking the vast ether woods. Kael wore simple, comfortable human clothing, his only adornment the bright, permanent cyan streak of the bond. He was now healthy, strong, and his mind was fully integrated with the world around him. He was a hybrid, a bridge between two worlds. The elders have accepted our shared fate, Lyra projected, her voice now calm, though tinged with the beautiful melancholy of acceptance. They see the wisdom in a ruler who values time. Your influence is permanent, consort. Kael turned, taking her hand. Her skin was still cold, but the connection between them was a constant, radiating warmth. I'm just glad I don't have to keep running, Kael smiled. We will always be running, my love, Lyra countered, her crimson eyes holding a familiar flicker of the huntress. But now we run together. Our time is not long by Eldrin standards, but it is infinite by the standards of love. She leaned her head against his shoulder. Her wings, large and powerful, draped protectively around his smaller, human frame. Kael was the human who had once feared her most, the alien vampire with lethal fangs. But those fangs, meant for death, had instead delivered salvation, love, and a destiny far grander than any Nobel Prize. We have a forever promise, Lyra, Kael whispered, looking out at the chaotic beauty of their shared world. A forever promise to live until the last moment of our balance, she confirmed. She lifted her head, and in a gesture of absolute equal devotion, she gently touched the cyan streak on his neck, the mark of their ultimate union. The Elder Queen and the human Taint, bound by a saving bite, stood ready to face their magnificent, fleeting future together.